Today's Quranic conversation is from Surah Taha. Surah Taha is truly a remarkable surah because it really highlights the story of Musa alayhi salam, and there are very beautiful nuances and lessons for those especially engaged in da'wah to be learned from Surah Taha. What does a da'i go through? The phases of a da'i, the qualities and the characteristics of a da'i, what they are required to have. These are all things that are mentioned in Surah Taha. In addition, I have to also remind everyone that the most mentioned prophet in the Quran, even more than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is Musa alayhi salam. And the reason why Musa alayhi salam is mentioned at such a high level is because there are many similarities between Musa alayhi salam and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Bani Israel that izzah, that maqam, that status, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took it away from them because they did not live up to that standard set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and hence Allah gave that honor and that izzah to the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah is teaching us all a lesson that if we as a Muslim ummah, if we do not uphold the standards set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah will take away their izzah from us. And we see the same thing happening today. Though we are the fastest growing religion in the world, you have to really honestly think about this. The fastest growing religion in the world. Yet, wallahi, today there is no religion that is mocked as much as Islam is. There is no religion whose followers are persecuted as much as Muslims are. All over the world you see where Muslims are being persecuted because they simply say La ilaha illallah. So we go back to the story of Musa alayhi salam, and especially in this day and age, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the story of Fir'aun, because if we even look at this day and age, this apartheid state that is Israel, that is committing a genocide against our brothers and sisters in Palestine, our brothers and sisters. The key thing is that if you look at this person who's calling the shots behind all this, behind the scenes, the prime minister, and if you look at Fir'aun and their characteristics, their mindset, wallahi, there are too many similarities. And once again, Allah gave us these stories so that you and I, we can find consolation. Because in this day and age, if a Muslim loses hope in Allah, where else will a Muslim go to? If a person loses hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many ulama, they say that you cannot be a Muslim and be hopeless at the same time. Being hopeless and being a Muslim is considered as an oxymoron, meaning that two things that cannot go hand in hand. So that is why if we are a Muslim, we can never lose hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why Allah gave us these stories so we can find some consolation and some hope in these stories. So we come to the story of Musa alayhi salam when he goes to Fir'aun and he's telling Fir'aun that an arsil ma'iya bani Israel. This is mentioned in Surah Shura. Shu'ara. So he's telling Musa, Fir'aun, that I want you to send Bani Israel with me. You have persecuted them, you have made them your slaves, you have abused them financially, physically, psychologically, in every way possible. Now it's about time you give them to me and let us go somewhere else. And he did not want to do that. So Surah Taha mentions that at that time, Fir'aun, in order to ensure that everyone is going to galvanize behind him, everyone is going to stand behind him, it is the nature of every single leader. When he's about to lose power and control, they always make it about the country. They always make it about the country. If you remember, for those of you who were there at 9/11, even after that, what was that one call every single time? If the Muslims come into this country, if Sharia law takes over, then all your privileges will be taken away. They actually use the country and their freedom to fight their own causes. Although, wallahi, they don't even care about their own people. Wallahi, they don't even care about their own people. But when it came to holding on to power, they made it about the country and their freedom and their privileges. Likewise, Fir'aun did the same exact thing. He told the people of Egypt that these two people, these two brothers are here to take away their country. And يُخْرِجَاكُم مِّنْ أَرْضِكُمْ بِسِحْرِهِمَا. When Musa alayhi salam threw down his staff and it turned to a serpent, he's telling them he's using this to remove all of us from our land. So once again, the tactic that he used is very common, something that we see very often in this day and age. Now, Musa alayhi salam, he's telling Fir'aun, you think that this is magic? You think you want to bring all your magicians together? Khalas, no problem. Let's have a competition. But see, Musa is smart. He knows that if Fir'aun just calls everyone and says that this is a day of competition, this is the day where we're gonna take back our country and so forth, and he were to call people, some people will come, some people may not come. But Musa is smart. He's telling him, let's choose a day where it is considered as a holiday in your country. It's already a holiday. It's already a day of festivities. People are going to be away from work. They're going to come as it is, but on that same day we will do this also. So what did Fir'aun do? He called. The Quran says, فَجَمَعَ كَيْدَهُ ثُمَّ أَتَى. He gathered all his people. Now what does every powerful person do? When it comes to using people, they are excellent. They are experts in using people for their own gain. So what did he do? He called all these magicians. And by the way, if you study the history of Bani Israel, magic was something that was very common. It was practiced abundantly. And one of the people who were the most privileged and the most rich and the most resourceful people in the community, in the society, were the magicians. So Fir'aun called all of them. They came to Fir'aun. And then they are the ones who are telling Fir'aun that if you want us to fight your battles, what do we get for it? What is it in it for us? What benefit do we get out of it? And Fir'aun is promising them everything. I will make you ana min al-muqarrabin. I will make you from amongst those who are the closest to me. Meaning that whatever you want, you got the hookups, you got the connections. I'll take care of you, don't worry about it. So now the time comes, and Musa alayhi salam, he gathers everyone. And he tells them, they even said, that who wants to go first? They even asked Musa alayhi salam that who wants to go first? And Musa alayhi salam said, you can go first. So at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that they put down their staffs and they put down their ropes and they turned into serpents, and there were serpents everywhere. And at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the state of the heart of Musa alayhi salam. فَأَوْجَسَ فِي خِيفَةِ نفسي Musa, that he in his heart, فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةَ مُوسَى, in his heart there was an element of fear. He's looking at everything around him and he's thinking, how is this my one serpent is going to overpower everything else? So at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that قُلْنَا لَا تَخَفْ إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْأَعْلَى. That do not fear, do not be worried about all this, because what you see in front of you is an illusion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to their magic as an illusion when He says, Saharu a'yunan nas. This was an illusion. This was magic and tricking the eyes of people, which is an illusion. So it's not real. On the other hand, when Musa alayhi salam put down his staff, what the magician knows what he's putting down. The magician knows that this is not real. But when the magician saw the serpent of Musa alayhi salam, they knew right away that this is not magic. This is not an illusion. This is, as we call it, the real deal. This is the real deal. And at that time, this one serpent overpowered all the other serpents. At that time, they realized that this is the real deal, and this man is a real deal. His message is a real deal. Therefore, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا, they all fell into sajda. قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ هَارُونَ وَمُوسَى. They accepted Islam on the hands of Musa alayhi salam and his brother Harun alayhi salam. But then look at the threat of Fir'aun. What Fir'aun wanted to accomplish was that everyone come. At the end of the day, everyone will be on the side of Fir'aun. Everyone will support Fir'aun. Everyone will be against Musa alayhi salam. That is what his plan was. And this is why we remind ourselves, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Today, what we see happening today, they have a plan. But Allah has a plan too. And the plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always supersede. This is our yaqeen. This is the things that we need to take away from these stories. And there's more things inshallah I'm going to mention at the end. I just want to go through the ayat. At that time, what did Fir'aun say? He threatened them. He says, فَلَا أُقَطِّعَنَّ أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ مِنْ خِلَافٍ. I'm going to cut your limbs and on opposite ends. If I cut your right leg off, I'm going to cut your left hand off. You understand? And so this is the threat. And not only that, فَلَا أُقَطِّعَنَّ أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ مِنْ خِلَافٍ وَلَا أُصَلِّبَنَّكُمْ. I'm not going to only just cut off your limbs from opposite ends, I'm going to hang you so you become an example for everyone else. That anyone who defies the orders of Fir'aun, this is their fate. This is their fate. Now, at that time, of course, no, they all came, even though they are the ones who were going to be amongst the closest, the cabinet members of Fir'aun. Even they were now confronting Fir'aun. إِنَّهُ مَنْ يَأْتِ رَبَّهُ مُجْرِمًا فَإِنَّ لَهُ جَهَنَّمْ لَا يَمُوتُ فِيهَا وَلَا يَحْيَا. These are now people who are coming to Fir'aun and they are confronting Fir'aun that we truly believe. This is the real deal and we're going to believe in him. Now, of course, the story is long, but there are a few important lessons that I really want all of us to take away from this. The very first one was, as I said earlier, every single oppressor, every single ruler, every single leader, they use a tactic of taking over. And this is one thing that if you think about Fir'aun, you know, there are many verses of the Quran, if you think about what Fir'aun used to say to Musa. When it came to holding on to power, he always made it about the country. But when it came to bragging about what he has, he would never talk about the country. Think about it. Fir'aun was a selfish man. He was a smart man. This is one thing, by the way, we don't realize. Fir'aun was a very intelligent and very smart man. In a conversation, how he could switch the conversation so quickly and so subtly is not something that many people can do. They can do. But Fir'aun had that ability. But Musa was, once again, it was a chess game. And Musa alayhi salam was also playing this game with Fir'aun. When Fir'aun would change the conversation, immediately Musa alayhi salam, he knew the game. And he was playing it accordingly. And he made sure that there was never a situation where he would get caught into the web of Fir'aun. So this is why it's important that every single time, especially for those who are giving da'wah, you have to know the game. Let me give you one example. How often it happens when you're engaged in da'wah or in a da'wah dialogue. Someone says to you, I remember I went to a church and someone asked me, I remember there was a lady, she asked me that, and there was a panel discussion, so majority of the questions were coming my way because I was a Muslim there. So she says that Islam oppresses women. This was her statement. Can you explain why does Islam oppress women? Now honestly, any person who is in a state of Dawah 101, anything you know, you're going to try to throw it at her, right? You throw the Quran at her, you throw the Sunnah at her, you throw everything you know at her. But you see, one thing about Dawah also is, you got to know how people think. You got to know how to give answers. The very first thing I asked her was, and this is a lesson for all of us, when someone asks you a loaded question, don't answer a loaded question. You know what I did? I asked her, can you please be very specific? Which area of life are you referring to? Which area or which specific thing are you referring to that Islam oppresses women? Wallahi, you know her answer was? She goes, I don't know. You see, now who's the one who looks like the fool at the end of the day? She does. You understand? In da'wah, you cannot answer a loaded question. You have to deconstruct a question. This is something that we learned from Musa alayhi salam. He knew the game. He knew how to give da'wah. When Fir'aun, once again, he was switching, he was also switching. You have to, people who are giving da'wah, you have to be on your feet. You have to be smart. And sometimes, by the way, there are times where even answering the question is of no use. Even if you have the right answer. You know why? Because the person who's asking you, they don't have the right intention in their heart. They're only asking you because they just want to create a scene. So this is why many times those who are in da'wah, you need to understand the person who's asking the question And I understand, you may say, well, I don't know what their niyyah is. Yes, no one knows what their niyyah is. But at the end of the day, if you have been in da'wah and you have observed, especially if you're getting into da'wah, first learn how to observe other people giving da'wah. Observe the experts and see how it's done. Then you can go and give da'wah. So this is the very first thing that we learn from this. The second thing that we learn is that just like Fir'aun, he gathered all the magicians. We learn that every single oppressor, just like this apartheid regime right now, when they wanted to commit a genocide, they called all their allies. Fir'aun was no different. In order to keep his country, in order to keep himself in power, he gathered all his allies. Once again, the Quran is telling us that these are things that have happened in the past. Learn from them. These things that we see happening today, it's not new. It's all a repetition of the past. Then the next thing is, فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً مُوسَى. If Musa alayhi salam, a prophet, an ulul azam prophet, no matter even he had a serpent, which was the real deal, even he, when he saw their serpents and he had a little fear in his heart, the lesson to be taken from this is, no matter what situation you're in, we are all human beings. And sometimes you look at the situation and your heart has a little fear in it. It's a human thing. You understand? It's not a sign that your iman is weak. It's not a sign that you have given up on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a sign that you are a human being. Simple as that. You understand? And once again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reinforcing Musa alayhi salam. He's giving him that support. And it's not like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, come on, Musa, after everything I gave you, now you're still doubting, now you still have the fear? No, that's not what Allah is doing. Allah is telling him, Innaka antal a'la. Allah is reinforcing him. So even when we have some doubts, even when we get startled and we lose our feet and we lose our momentum, no problem, inshallah, it happens. But remember, we always are on the haqq, and we need to regain our composure and present whenever the time comes. Then the next thing is, what do they say? Amanna bi Rabbi Haruna wa Musa. What do we learn from this? We learn from this that no matter what kind of a person you are, these people were honest people. These people were honest people. When they saw Musa alayhi salam's serpent, they knew that this is not just magic. This is actually a real serpent. So at that time, they converted to Islam, which tells us people who are genuine in their heart, when they see the situation, they will come into the fold of Islam. You just have to give them a little time. And subhanAllah, since this genocide has started, even overseas, to be honest, how many people have come into the fold of Islam? Though no matter what's going on, the Quran is telling us this has happened in the past, it's going to happen again. How many people went on TikTok? How many people went on Instagram? And they're saying that I cannot imagine. People are saying what kind of a nation these Muslims are, what kind of a qawm they are, that their people are being slaughtered, yet they keep on calling up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Children in Palestine, when they're being asked that what's going on, they always say, Allah ma'ana, Allah ma'ana. Look at their faith. And people they are just astonished by their faith, the faith of the Muslims, and they're saying that what is behind this faith? And they go and they pick up a Quran. This is something that we see even in the Quran. These magicians, they had good hearts. When they saw the truth, they came into the fold of Islam. Another thing that we learn from this story is that when they converted to Islam, you see, once again, now they have become a threat to Fir'aun. What did Fir'aun say? We have to always pay attention, to the nuances of the Quran. Here he says, فَلَا أُقَطِّعَنَّ أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ مِنْ خِلَافٍ. I'm going to cut your limbs from opposite ends. When you cut, I'm just saying, imagine if you cut a person, both legs off, they usually can still be functional in their life. Okay? If you cut someone's hands off, both hands off, they can still be functional in some capacity because they still have their two legs. But if you cut someone's one leg off and one hand off on opposite ends, life has become even more difficult. You understand? To do anything in life becomes more difficult. Now think about this. What Shaitan is doing is he's handicapping them forever. Likewise, we see what's happening today. People who are speaking up, what is the government doing? They're handicapping people, taking away their jobs, sanctioning them, arresting them and so forth. We see history is repeating itself. Just like Fir'aun was handicapping them and showing his, flexing his muscles, the same thing the governments are doing today. No matter how much this country says freedom of speech, wallahi, if there's one thing that this genocide has taught us, is that there is no such thing called freedom of speech. This thing that they call for democracy, wallahi, democracy is the greatest flaw on the face of this earth. It's one of the greatest, it's such a flaw that every place where they try to hold democracy, those are the countries where they do the most amount of dhulm on their people. This democracy is a flawed concept as it is. So you see that these kind of people, Fir'aun tried to handicap people. And not only that, you see what he said after that? I'm going to make you an example. And this is what these people, they do. They persecute, and then they put them on social media to show everyone that if you speak up against the government, or you go on college campuses and you speak up against the injustice, your scholarships will be taken away, you'll be expelled from the university, and so forth. This is all a repetition. This is why the Quran was given to us, so that we can see what's happening today is a repetition of what happened in history. And we can find consolation. How can we find consolation? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the end of the day, what did He do? He destroyed Fir'aun. He destroyed this zalim. And just like that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He destroys every single zalim. They are on the same trajectory as Fir'aun, and they will inshallah receive the same fate, or more worse than Fir'aun, inshallah. But the point is that we learn these stories, we go through these stories, and when you read the translation of the Quran, try to read a little deeper. Try to go a little deeper and try to understand the story and relate it. The point is, imagine if the Quran, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention all this to us? Why did He give us these stories so that you and I, we can relate to it? If these stories were not relatable to us, then what's the point of getting the Quran? What's the point of picking up the Quran and reading these stories? This Quran in itself, the reason why is called a timeless guidance. In every era, there is something in the Quran that we can relate to. We can take the situation and relate to some kind of story in the Quran. This is the reason why we read the Quran. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, first of all, based on what we have read from Surah Taha today and the story that we have read about this conversation between Fir'aun and Musa alayhi salam and the magicians and so forth, and not only that, but now understanding in light of what's going on today, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give izzah to our brothers and sisters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our brothers and sisters. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to apply the teaching of the Quran in our daily lives. Ameen Rabbil Alameen. Wa jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما.